decision makers and inside of your organization who are going to say, yes, there's champions, there's decision makers, and, the ultimate person who's voted the signatory. And to any extent that you can speak to that, that would be great. And then I have a follow-up question.
Right. And, just one other point, just building on Dominic's question, would be helpful if you identify that there are different types of care management solutions. We said, we have this big umbrella. So if the decision, for example, for the PA portion sits under a different part of the organization, that is also helpful for us to understand versus when you're making decisions around, post-acute care, or I don't know if that sits under care management, but for example, if you use, any vendors or make decisions around health assessments. So, if those different portions of the care management sit under different portions of your organization, that's also interesting for us to know.
Sure. So I'll speak more, to my prior life at Aetna and Anthem. So, I would say 99% of all things sort of care management were done in-house, but not everything. So one of, it's been quite a while, but it's maybe a decade or so, where plans and customers were, seeing the expense of high-tech radiology just going through the roof, utilization and unit cost, but unit cost especially. And so many of them brought in third-party vendors. Med Solutions is one. There's another one that was an acronym. I can't think of it right now, to basically manage that space. So they did everything from they went out, they didn't do the credentialing, but they would go and do an inventory of everyone who had an MRI, to get all of the details around, the efficacy of the machines and how new are the magnets and, all of the different things that they would look for. And then they would also take the financial component and start stratifying the different providers who had MRIs. And then they then took over the pre-cert specifically just for high-tech radiology. So the Anthems and Aetnas of the world didn't do the pre-cert anymore just for those items. They would be funneled directly to these companies. Again, Med Solutions is one or was one many years ago, and they would handle all of that. And then also in the NICU space, Anthem for a while, worked with another company to do the care management. What were they called? I think CareNext was the name of the company. I think they were out of California to basically do the care management of the NICU babies. So there's certainly, even though they did, I would say 95% of all other care management, they would pick something that usually was hitting a radar from a cost or quality perspective and sort of bring, partner with a vendor to try to manage that. And sometimes they worked well and sometimes they did. So that may have answered the question about even with the large ones, you sometimes see a hybrid of, certain things being spun off because it doesn't make sense. The expertise doesn't exist. And so to build it would be too expensive even for the big players. But otherwise, for the most part, I think that that's something that they would hold on to, which is different from the division I work for now, which is much, much smaller. And it makes more sense for us to keep that outsourced. I don't think I hit all the questions. I think there were a lot of questions.
No, so let me reiterate. So one is the care management activities, do they all for the most part live under the same umbrella, like in terms of and granted, probably the clinic piece is probably its own piece because it's a clinic, but and it may be you who has oversight given your responsibilities over those activities, but do they, not oversight of the activity, but I guess oversight, over the systems, processes, et cetera. Do they all live under the same umbrella, or are they bifurcated into different places?
Yeah, I think this was sort of back to your question. So we have, just to make it a little bit more nuanced or complicated because that's how it works, so we've got the ACO, the Mission Health Partners. We have the self-insured health plan, with a little bit of a bifurcation for some Medicare Advantage, and that's called Healthy State. We then have an entity called Health Plan Solutions, which is technically where I live. And I live there with, I think there are only 4 of us who live in this Health Plan Solutions sort of umbrella that has responsibility over both the ACO and the health plan. So for us, because we're structured a little bit differently, the decision, for example, a care management platform would really involve the people in health plan solutions, but it would also
jump in and ask one, follow-up question related to something that we discussed a lot earlier in the conversation. When you talk about the model, like in the post-acute care, I understand that you are an integrated provider as well. So I would imagine that in facilities you already have a lot of personnel, so it's like a SNF or a long-term care facility. But
correct.
When you do post-acute care, so if someone is discharged to their house, would you send people to that house if you identify that a member as a high-risk person? And would you send people there to do this sort of, is this person going to land safely? Do they have their medications? Is there any risk that they will fall? Do they have a new, appointment? That sort of thing. And that's number one question. Like, do you have that service at all? And then if you have that, are those part of your integrated system, or that would be a vendor doing that portion?
So currently that is all sort of managed and provided through the accountable care organization. So, for example, through the community paramedics, as well as through some of our nursing staff, if they believe that there's, part of the model of the ACO that they developed here is really based on the social determinants of health. So and Western North Carolina has a significant portion of the population that is economically disadvantaged. So oftentimes it's an issue where, you can give me all the insulin in the world, but I'm going to be back in the ER. And ultimately the reason why is because I don't have I don't have a refrigerator. I don't have anywhere to store it. And so through the ACO model, it's a literal example. They have purchased a refrigerator for somebody because ultimately it was better for quality of care and a much lower expense than having me keep coming to the ER. That's actually a real life example. And so they've got, not only the community paramedics, and then they're also integrated with the, this is a bit off topic, but integrated with the local food banks. We're integrated, and all of them share the, access to the population health tool. And it's, there are guardrails as to what they can see, but there's the food bank, there's the, it's called Pisgah Legal. Pisgah is a big mountain here in Western North Carolina, to the Legal Aid Society, all of those things to support, I forget the name of the organization, but, government organization as far as housing. Sometimes, people don't have anywhere to go if they're discharged. But typically,
very holistic.
Yeah. It completely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, but just sort of back to the base question, it's the accountable care organization that has sort of access to the mission community paramedics that go out and do the medication adherence. But I have heard stories where literally our nurse will get it in the truck with the community paramedic and go out, because otherwise, even though they've set up home health in some of these rural geographies, it's a, very sort of insular, and they will not let a stranger in their home. And so there are stories of how the nurses will go and just talk to the family through the door 2 or 3 times, and then they'll let them in. So, but that is all managed here. It makes, I'm sure you're going to look up Western North Carolina and see what kind of people live here.
Actually, in Massachusetts, we had the same issue. So I thought it's not just North Carolina. There's a cultural thing. It depends on the culture. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and just see, would you be able to establish the contrast of how it's done, in your current organization versus the Aetna and terms of the world? Do you have visibility on how they did that? Did they also provide this breadth of service, in terms of the post-acute care, sending people to their homes? And also, if they did, was that with their own resource, or they would contract with vendors?
At the time I was at Anthem and Aetna, I am not aware of a resource that they had that would go do the medication adherence and go do sort of that, there's a word for it, I can't think of it, that basically makes, sort of secure the home to ensure that there were not, to eliminate or minimize fall risks and that sort of thing. So they would, I don't even know that they were doing it, or when I left a few years